In this video, you will learn to describe how the destruction, corruption, modification, theft, removal, loss, or disclosure of information or other resources and the interruption of service can constitute threats to the security of data or systems.
About the threats, the sources that this can come from. So the threats to a data communication system, that's our enterprise, include these 5 elements, right? The destruction or information of and or other resources. Think about denial of service. This is the predominant threat to large-scale information processing enterprises. So, the destruction of information, by the way, also the destruction of our security enforcement points. Modification, we talked about the integrity side of that. Being able to modify a message in flight between Alice and Bob is a significant risk. Most people, including the government side, worry more about the modification than the corruption of that. The corruption can be detected. Modification, not so much, although we'll show you a mechanism a little later how to detect if a message has been modified. But we think about those passive attacks where systems, where the intruders listen and record the messages and transition into an active attack where a very slight modification of a message is executed. Very, very dangerous, can occur for a long time before people know it. So the targets, right, are primarily the theft of let's use the term critical information. These are the credit card numbers, the goals of the attacker. It also may be confidential or classified information on a defense network, right, is the theft and removal of that. So the disclosure of this information. Now this is sort of interesting from a perspective of confidentiality. So are the WikiLeaks documents, which have been released much to the government's angst over the last year, a disclosure of information? They absolutely are. Is that a threat to an IT enterprise? Yes. So I believe that the WikiLeaks ecosphere is actually a confidentiality violation. And of course, we also talk about the interruption of services. This is the availability side. Remember we talked earlier in Module 1 that we've got not only an availability parameter that a service is capable, right? Is available, but we also need to worry about the timeliness of that. That if we submit a response to a message and are expecting a response back, that it occur within a timely period. So on thefts here, threats. So threats can really be of two classes. So one obviously is the accidental threat. This is one without lack of criminal intent. The other is intentional threats, where there's an intention to violate a security policy. Now, from the security protection perspective, we do not care between the two of them. Whether an individual, a privileged user, has an oops moment or intentionally violates a security policy that impacts the enterprise, the result's exactly the same. So we do not differentiate much between these two. Now we'll create use cases that will help articulate our architecture, but from the result side, we don't differentiate much between those two. So be aware of the differentiation between accidental and intentional threats. So whether this is an intentional or an unintentional result is that if there's a response, there's an action by the enterprise, data moves out, privileges are reduced, some change in the state of the security ecosphere that qualifies as an attack. So this is where we've moved from of vulnerability where something could happen, the threat, to an attack or an exploit where something has happened. That's the transition right there. So we worry about vulnerabilities, what could happen. We react to exploits, what has happened. Once again, here's the differentiation between passive and active. Passive, extremely dangerous, long-term presence on the network, undetected by Alice, Bob, or any other user. One of our architecture slides speaks to an industry average of exploits, attacks being passively on the network for 284 days before detection. So one of the, like I said, difference between passive and active, there is a change to the state of the security ecosphere.